For years, emerging countries that you don't think about very much have had a secret plan to destroy the US dollar. And now those countries are taking bigger, bolder, and less secret steps to impair the US economy and the US dollar. Here's what that means to you. There's been a lot of talk recently about the BRICS, which is the emerging economies of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Countries that are all not Western, countries that all rather get along with each other geopolitically, saying, let's talk about having our own currency. And certainly let's talk about getting together closer economically to not have to deal with the conditions that are put on the world by the West and by the United States. They're not the only ones. Brazil and Argentina have talked about rolling out their own combined currency to strengthen their economies. And the bottom line to this is that countries around the world want to win. One thing I've been telling you for almost a decade is that you are going to see much more competition out there in the world that impairs the so-called moat in investing terminology that countries like the United States have. Because it wasn't that long ago, maybe early in my lifetime and maybe within your lifetime, that if you were born in the United States or you were born in Germany or you were born in Canada, you had it made and you just had to sail through school, maybe only high school, and you went and got a good paying job. But now there are good paying jobs all around the world. Countries and the places that we've talked about for years in South America, Central and Eastern Europe, South and Southeast Asia, and other parts of the world are stepping up and saying, we want our people to have good paying jobs. And Nomad Capitalist as a company has taken advantage of that, opening offices, hiring people all around the world. You don't have to hire people in the United States anymore. You don't have to invest only in the United States anymore. And I believe that the moat that those Western countries had, just because they existed, is going to go away. Not entirely, but it's going to be minimized by more other countries saying, we want to be in the game as well. And that's going to offer lots of people around the world a lot of competition. India and Russia are agreeing to use their own currencies in trade. The Chinese renminbi, now the most traded foreign currency in Russia. Brazil and China have agreed to use their own currency in their deals. And what these countries are doing is saying, we don't want the West involved in our business. We think they've treated us unfairly. And if you've never left the West, you may not entirely understand this. I've sat next to many people on planes. Sat next to a gentleman from India not very long ago on a plane. His perspective on the world, on geopolitics, and on the economy is much different. He's from a world that does not talk about the international communities, they say, which is basically the US and Canada, the UK, Western Europe, and maybe Japan and Australia. The rest of the world feels left out. And once the cat is out of the bag, it's hard to put it back in. That's why things like the petrodollar were so important. That's why the US really wants to maintain its dominance. There are different opinions on how this could unfold. Some people believe this will be the end of the US dollar, and I'm loath to make that prediction because there's been people, including some who watch content like ours, who are very eager and they've been talking for 5 decades how the dollar is going to collapse tomorrow. I don't believe that's true. And I've seen numerous sources around the news that believe, hey, the dollar will still remain dominant. But as I said, economies and success thrives on the margins. One of the things I looked at during the global financial crisis in the late 2000s, look at how many people own homes in the United States. It went from something like 69 to like 64%, which doesn't seem like a huge drop. I mean, it doesn't sound to the average person like that's it didn't go from 69 to 19. But that marginal change, look at what happened. And so imagine if just 5% of that trade or 1% of the trade in the world could shift over to a more Eastern-focused system. We've been telling you for years that if you actually chart, because people do this, chart kind of the economic center of the world. Many, many, many years ago, centuries, thousands of years ago, that was very focused on Asia. It increasingly moved west and got over to somewhere above Western Europe, and now it's moving back. The economic center of the world is moving back towards Asia. And so dominance by Western countries is going to be harder to maintain by all these other places who want to get ahead for themselves. They want to do better for their people. They want to create good paying jobs for their people. Somehow in the Western world, politicians think they can fight that. They talk about how we created a middle class in Asia by emptying out our own, as if people are just going to naturally not go where they're treated best. We say go where you're treated best because it's the natural human order. If you can hire better, smarter, lower cost labor somewhere else with better tax conditions, better regulatory conditions, why wouldn't you do that? And as the world has opened up and as the internet has allowed that to happen, Companies like ours are doing that. The reality is that the countries in the BRICS, they may not all play as well together as people may think. These are countries that each have their own economic interest. Does India want to be subservient to China? Russia is actually one of the smaller ones in there. Do they want to give up control? They obviously have some, occasionally geopolitical issues. But what I see possible is more of the regional plays like Brazil and Argentina, two currencies that have at many times gotten beaten up, two countries that do have a lot of resources but have had struggles. I believe that you could see other parts of the world get involved in this and say, how do we take back our economic sovereignty? If you look at, for example, parts of West Africa that still have, basically, they're under the control of what happens in Paris. They have the CFA franc, for example. Are they going to say, hey, we're tired of this. We don't control our own policy, essentially. We want to become bigger players on the world stage. You are seeing that. And so countries that have been sidelined want to grow, and they're going to grow. And I believe that you're going to see some of these places be more investable. Now, you may not want to go and invest in Russia because you don't agree with what Russia's doing, and that's fine. You may not want to invest in China because you believe, hey, the demographics are a problem and it's not as great as we thought it was. I personally have invested in places like India and Indonesia where I believe the demographics and the economics are good, and I'm doing that on a very long-term basis. I've looked at a lot of things in Africa. It's harder to get into investments in Africa, but I think there's a lot of potential there. It's not all going to be perfect, but this speaks to a big issue of control. What's happening with these BRICS and what's happening with these other players and how you can actually benefit, because the world is moving east. Now, you can complain and you can bury your head in the sand the way the politicians are doing, thinking, hey, the U.S. will always be number one just because. And again, I don't think the U.S. will become some tin pot third world dictatorship, but it's already been trending downward. And our clients tell us it's not the country you left all those years ago, Andrew. So will you complain or will you take advantage? Let's talk about, for example, how money moves around the world. One of the reasons these countries want to cut the U.S. out is because when the dollar's involved, then you get basically the entire U.S. financial system involved. You have transactions that have to get cleared through the U.S. And so therefore the U.S. has a say in everything that you do. So if you're holding dollars and if you're sending dollars, the U.S. basically gets to tell you what to do. And so they're saying, let's use our own currencies and we'll set our own rules. Let's create our own new currency and let's create an entire new system that benefits the countries that aren't part of this Western-leaning system. I'm not saying one is right or one is wrong. We interviewed Nigel Farage. He said, listen, the Western world and the UK need to get these other countries on board with shared values. But those countries aren't willing to accept a world where the UK and the US get rich and everybody has high-paying jobs just because, and they don't get rich. I live in many of these places. I live part-time in Malaysia where the politicians say, we're tired of doing what you guys say. You guys already got rich. Now it's our turn to get rich, and we're going to do what we have to do to create wealth for our people. We're going to use our resources. We're going to develop our countries. This is why offshore banking and other currencies for you as an individual can actually work. Because if you want control over your money and you don't entirely trust one financial system, having money out of your country, doing so legally, but having that in other currencies can give you an advantage that who knows what could happen, right? So if you were to go and open a bank account in another country, Singapore, Switzerland, all the way down to places like Georgia or even Cambodia, which is expected to be the world's fastest growing economy this year. You can hold your money in dollars if you want, but you can also switch that money over in that bank to euros or to their local currency, whether it's the Swiss franc or the Singapore dollar, and then you're playing under their system. So if you trust the Swiss authorities or the Singaporean authorities to manage their currency better and have fewer of these restrictions, people talk about things like CBDCs. They talk about government control of money. They look at what happened in Canada last year with Justin Trudeau saying if you donate to the wrong people, maybe we'll even take away your passport. But certainly we did restrict your access to your money. And so if you had it in another country, I'm not saying you should use it as an excuse to do bad stuff. But I'm saying if you're just acting the way you are now and you believe the government where you live is going to be in crackdown mode, you would accept that someone who lived in China who wanted to put their money in your country for safety, you'd say, hey, that sounds normal. But what I'm saying is there's going to be just as big of a risk that where you live is going to find reasons why you, who don't toe the line, we want to control your money. If you had an offshore bank account and you held money in different currencies, or even if you just bought property somewhere else, you could use that in a different currency to give yourself an advantage to where you had asset protection now, you had some diversification, and you had some money that was out of the system that may change. This also benefits you from what we talked about here in immigration. You're going to have fewer weak countries. You consistently see every year certain countries close down their golden visa programs, close down their citizenship programs, make their residence programs more expensive. Brazil, Argentina, very affordable countries to get into. And if you want to live in South America, not great from a tax perspective, but you can go and you can get citizenship pretty easily. You can live in a place that's far away from many of the world's problems. Even in Argentina, you live outside of the city. I mean, you can have a great life very affordably. But what happens if the currency strengthens there, right? They're going to make that more expensive. Certain countries may shut down their options entirely, right? And so the countries that are rolling out the red carpet for you right now, that are offering you, hey, invest some money, open a bank account, get a golden visa, we'll make you a citizen in 5 years. They're offering you diversification. Some of those may go away. And so I think that it's a good opportunity for you right now to go out and say, where are the countries that are rolling out the red carpet where I can go and plant some flags around the world and get diversification? If I like South America, Brazil and Argentina are options that are available to you. So are places like Ecuador. You're also going to get set up there with plenty of natural resources. You're going to get set up there with plenty of room to roam. You can get on the track towards a second passport if you want to. But I think fewer of those opportunities will exist long term as countries decide we don't have to be in this system over here in the West. We're going to create our own, and that's going to create more wealth in our countries. I also think some citizenships could be more valuable. Is the only metric of citizenship if you can visit the United States, if you can visit Canada. Serbia has done a great job of growing their passport. They're now going to be able to go to Saudi Arabia. You may say, hey, who cares about that? But Serbia's passport for traveling almost anywhere except for the US, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand is really one of the best. In a country where they largely leave people alone, they're not following you around the world, monitoring what you're doing. They let you be free. And so I would be looking at passports like something like a Serbia that's not in the European Union, but it has a very high quality, ability to travel, gives you a place to live where there's good amount of resources. That's the kind of thing that will be valuable in the future, because Serbia does kind of straddle the line between being in league with the EU as well as being in league with Russia and China and the Gulf, because they have to grow their economy. And they're realizing we can't rely on just one place in the world. And so the US dollar is going to remain important, but the trend is not your friend. I mean, Jim Rogers has talked about how the Hong Kong dollar should just get rid of the US dollar and go peg to the Chinese renminbi. What about the Gulf? You have Gulf currencies pegged to the US dollar. What happens with everyone moving to Dubai right now and all the money coming into that Gulf region because it's so tax friendly for, among other reasons? Are they going to stick around with the US dollar forever? All right. I'm not saying, again, go to Russia, but look at some of these emerging markets. It's what Nomad Capitalist helps people do every day. Again, if you qualify for citizenship in a Western country through your descent or you want to move there, fine. But with some of your money, look at where is the puck going and skate there. Get internationalized. Look at where is the world going to be going. And I don't want all my exposure being in the West. Even if I'm going to be in kind of a proxy like a Dubai, and I'm going to have a bank account there. Maybe I'll have a company there. Maybe I'll get residence there. Fine. That's still going to get me more access to growth economies in the Middle East, North Africa, maybe South Asia. I'm going to be able to take advantage of what's happening in those regions better. I'm not saying go and open a bank account in India either. I'm saying look at what bank accounts can I open that I can have different currencies. Where can I invest and take advantage of stocks in different up-and-coming countries where the odds of recession this year are much, much, much lower than the West? And where am I positioning myself for my residence and citizenship for myself, my children, and their children to know that as the world changes, I'm not going to be sitting in the West complaining how my dollar is not as powerful as it once was. I'm going to have profited, and I'm going to have the optionality to live and to spend time and to be part of this up-and-coming world that may offer a lot of opportunities.